tell me, what would that green economy look like? Just give me some of the ideas of what it would look like and how it would be different from things currently.
First, I think we should say, I've done a lot of work on this with an organisation called climategathering.org, where we did a lot of conversations around think about how do we tell this story. And first thing we admit is we don't know everything. We don't know exactly what's going to evolve technologically and so on. But also, if we're going to stop people going from A to B, going to this unsustainable economy, you've got to have a better alternative. The economy's got to be a better economy. Like, we're not just going to wag our fingers at people and say, thou shalt not do this, that and the other, and think that's going to work.
So give people the alternatives.
You have to have an alternative.
Yeah.
I'm influenced a lot by Jeremy Rifkin. I don't know if you've ever read of his stuff, The Empathetic Civilization and all that. And his understanding of the revolutions that are taking place in technology. There's a digital there are 3 revolutions happening at the moment.
Okay.
A digital revolution, thanks to Moore's law, doubling and processing capability of data, has affecting everything. It's about to eat up the financial system, having eaten up the media world. The second revolution that's taking place is a clean energy revolution, and it is. And the reason it is because it's a better energy system. Wind and solar power coming down in price so that they just beat everything now, and they're just better priced. They're better technologies. They're not as dense in energy terms compared to the fossil fuel alternative, but they're everywhere. Everyone has access to them. We'll never fight over wind power or solar power the way we've been fighting over oil and gas. Similarly, electric vehicles, it's game over. The transport system, private car system is going to go electric, not just because it's cleaner, but also it's cheaper. The fuel cost is a fifth of the fossil fuel cost. The maintenance cost is a fraction because there's only 35 moving parts in an electric vehicle. There's 130 parts in a conventional car. So it's much easier to maintain. And there are examples where, so that energy revolution is happening.
Okay.
And similarly on transport, the third one, which is probably the last one in terms of the revolutions that are taking place, I think it is coming, not just with electric vehicles, but with autonomous driving, with shared economy, with kind of using some of the digital and clean energy technologies. A technological revolution where we go back to the centre of cities, where we don't have car-dominated communities, where the likes of cycling and walking becomes a really mainstream viable alternative. So I think those 3 technological revolutions are going to decide what comes next. I think the really interesting question is, what's the underlying values? What's the underlying philosophy? What's the underlying social context to those revolutions? That actually, to get them right, to be really good at this, if a country wants to place itself, it's not just that you've got the best scientists or you've got the best technology. I think it'll actually happen in those places where there's trust in those revolutions, where there isn't division, social division, where security is enhanced, my security is enhanced when your security is enhanced too. And I think the change that's coming, it seems to me, is a change not just because of technology driving it, it's a different economic model. George Monbiot's been writing about it.
More cooperative community, is it more?
I think more community. I was just going to say George Monbiot's been writing about it. If you look at the big story, like from after the Second World War, there was a common strong political narrative. It was the social democratic one. That government is there to protect you against big business, to provide your health, education, housing, other needs. We lost faith in it. I'm old enough to remember in the late 70s, early 80s, that was replaced for a variety of reasons with faith in the market. To protect you sometimes against big government. So increasingly for those following 35 years, from let's say 1980 through to 2008 with the financial crash, it was that the market knows best. And all the OECD, European Union, all the institutions were around how do you unleash the power of the market. That's no longer viable. Not only because of the internal implosion that occurs in markets every now and then, but also because it's just not sustainable ecologically. So what's next? And I think it is an economy which is a combination of the two. I think the state's going to have a much bigger role again.
So is it back to that social democratic model?
No, because I think the social democratic model, to run these revolutions, you do also need enterprise. I think there will still be enterprise. I think it'll be enterprise with a slightly different culture to it. It won't be the Gordon Greco, greed is good, yellow braces, the hedge fund manager is king. I think it will be back towards people who can deliver services for community that enhance community, that make it sustainable. And sustainability and social progress going hand in hand.
So it's not, and when you say sustainability, it's not just about ecological sustainability. Obviously, that's a huge part of it. But it seems to me there's like almost a revolution of values. Seems to be what you're talking about in part.
I think that's key. I mean, I'm a businessman. Before I got into politics, I was an entrepreneur. I mean, out of necessity, I was unemployed. I was but I consider myself an entrepreneur. There's nothing wrong with business.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with enterprise. I mean, for me, running a business, I mean, yes, you have to make a profit to survive, to be able to pay everyone, to be able to keep going. But actually, the business was a form of self-expression. It was, I had a green business. It was a cycling holiday business. And I was proud to do it. And I think there's a role for that sort of enterprise. But I think it does and will and has to be based on values other than the profit motive. I remember years ago, and I worked in the business school in UCD and with a great future behind me in that world. I remember going for an interview in some very big top company, and someone asked me the question of what was the key thing in business, or what's the key measure of success. Okay. And I started this thing about what your values are and what, it's self-expression, creative, conceptual art almost. And they were going to go, no, it's about sales, it's about
the bottom line.
Profits, it's about bottom line. It's not. The new economy, yes, you got to make profit to survive. But if profits you measure, I don't think it's going to thrive in this new economy.
So it's a bigger picture, really, is it?
And I think it's a more collaborative economy, it's a more sharing economy, it's more ecological in the sense it is about connectivity. I think it will be global and local. I don't think we'll go back just to a De Valerian kind of idea.
Self-sufficiency and...
We've tried that and people voted with their feet. And I think as well, like there's nothing wrong with us taking the technological developments that are happening in California or in China or in Germany and deploying them here and sharing our advances with elsewhere. I mean, this is a global problem. It will require global solutions. It will require global cooperation. I don't believe in economic nationalism in either Britain or America or anywhere else. Even a green economic nationalism where everything just retreats to the local, I don't think it'll work. I think it has to be global. But it has to be very strong in terms of local solutions and community development as it develops in business. Whereas I think the business model for the previous 35, 40 years was a form of globalization that didn't have sustainability, either social or ecological at its core, and that has to change. It's a revolution. I mean,
it sounds even what you're saying is like it's more democracy as well. So more local. And I understand. I get the point about not back to a De Valerian sort of ideal of misty-eyed sort of nationalism, but actually local people having more autonomy. And I mean, even like in recent years, we saw the Citizens' Assembly, which were 99 randomly selected people put into a room over a weekend or two, and non-expert, although they were I suppose exposed to expertise, and yet what came out of that was pretty progressive, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, and particularly on the work they did in climate was really good. The people they had in speaking was really brilliant, and hopefully we can take up some of those recommendations. But I think you're right in terms of, come back to those three revolutions I was talking about, the third one, which is maybe say is a revolution in terms of how we treat space, a revolution in planning, in housing, in transport, to stop what we've done. I always liked, there was a writer Milan Kundera, he wrote a book years ago, I remember reading about it. He said, we've created this A to B culture. It's all about, transport's all about getting as quickly as you can from A to B. And you forgot all the places in between. And you killed them. They're just motorway edge of, and it's horrible spaces. So we need a revolution so that every space is part of an urban planning, is cared for, is special, is kind of part of this change. And actually to do that, to get really high quality local communities with local parks, local use of energy, local really good management of water, local food, as well as transport and housing, getting that right. That sort of knowledge of how to do that best, you can't really do top down, because Dublin ain't going to tell Cork how Cork is going to thrive. It is best left to Cork to decide, and in some ways compete for who's going to be best at it, who's going to come up with the best solutions, and then share those solutions. But I think it has to be that third revolution particularly That's not global, that's local, because it's about rediscovering what's special in every space and rediscovering that every child growing up in a street is an important, their environment, their local space, so that they're free to wander, free to wonder at the world around them. That's the scale of change. What we need won't come from a top-down way.
And going back, I suppose, to, like I think you referred to earlier on, actually people living in the city centre. Because I was talking to someone during the week, and he drives 1.5 hours in the morning and 1.5 hours in the evening to work, and that probably wouldn't be exceptional. I mean, that's a huge, apart from the environmental impact of that, but that's a huge, doesn't get to see his family. He's obviously sitting in a car for 3 hours a day, which has, so maybe getting people back to actually living, regenerating the city centres, which became hollowed out over the last.
And not just city centres, every town.
Every town, yeah.
And the ones that are doing it are the ones that are succeeding.
Right.
Like Clonakilty is booming, Skib is booming, Bandon and Youghal aren't.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because those, the ones I mentioned first, tend to have really good urban core.
Yeah.
Westport is booming in the way that Ballina is not. Why is that?
Okay.
Again, because they've taken real pride in life and back in the centre. So this is not back in what I said at the start, that you have to have a better alternative.
Yeah.
This is a better
so the alternatives are there. And I suppose just maybe to conclude, how optimistic, I mean, obviously we're facing, or we are in very serious times. The science would tell us that the window of opportunity for addressing climate change is closing rapidly. How optimistic or hopeful would you be that this significant change is going to happen? That
I've been saying to my wife for 25 years, who says, you watch it now, Dublin's about to change. Unfortunately, I'm being honest here, just in the last week or two, what I see here in the Dáil, we had the transport authorities in here, National Transport Authority, and Transport Infrastructure Ireland, which are responsible for building our transport infrastructure. And they were asked the question, how would you deal with the congestion problem which is developing in Dublin, which is a really acute problem? And their answer was, and I kid you not, we're going to widen the N7 between Naas and Newbridge, we're going to widen the N2, we're going to widen the N3, we're going to widen the N11. It's cuckoo. And we're still doing it.
Yeah.
Conservatism it's still road building, it's still the US Highway Code circa 1980. Yeah. And you know what the funny thing is? Even in the States now, even in the Trump states, they're realising actually that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like even in Los Angeles, which was the home of this freeway kind of model,
the culture,
they're digging up the freeways, they're putting in metros. So we have a real problem. We as a country, the reason why our figures are so bad now, it's not that we're bad on climate. Irish people are good on climate. Irish people are actually very well able to make the adaptation. When we do, we're really successful. But we're stuck in an outdated, in my mind, particularly planning model and economic model. I don't think the centre of the system here understands the scale and the opportunity for change. In truth, what we need is similar to what happened, the scale of change here in the late 50s. That moment when everyone was marching with their feet, leaving the country, there was a real crisis. We had a seismic shift in the centre of the administrative system and the political system. Both Whitaker and Lemass realised we have to change, completely change from going from a closed economic model to an open one. And it took 20 or 30 years to implement it, but we did consistently for 20, 30 years invest in education, join the European Union, set up tax-free centres in China and so on to implement that vision, and it came to pass. We became one of the most globalised, open, successful economies in the world. Similarly now, we need to switch from being an unsustainable economic model to a really interesting, sustainable one. We don't have a Whitaker and we don't have a Lemass, and that's being honest. And it's not that the Irish people don't want to do this, I think they do. But I think there's a lack of leadership at the centre, and one of the reasons we're active in politics is to try and make that change.
Yeah, and just on the planning, do you think and I suspect I know the answer to this question, but is the planning process we have fit for purpose then in that case, or how?
I don't think it's very hard to get a good planning process because look at any country, they always have had certain difficulties. I think the biggest problem we have is political. I think actually it's the lack of leadership at a city level as well, particularly. Like I think we do need a mayor for Dublin. That is really priority, mayor for Galway, Cork, Waterford, Limerick.
Have we in some ways the old, I think the old politics in Ireland has always been when we go abroad, it's like Ireland's so small, it doesn't really matter what we do, it has no impact. Should we maybe in a way flip that we're a small agile economy and that we could be a model for the rest of the world?
Yeah, we could, but flip it another way again. There's actually a bigger philosophical, and this is where you got to really think into the story of what's happening. You're right, that to date has been, sure, why would we do anything since the Americans haven't done it, or why would we do anything that the Chinese aren't doing it?
Etc.
The nature of this revolution, and it's towards a better economic system, one of the attractive things about it is that everyone can do it. Everyone has to do it. Everyone has a chance to be the star place. So every village, every community in Ireland is as important as the community in downtown New York or Shanghai. This is not exclusive. This belongs to everyone. And taking it on is not a burden, because actually what you're doing in the process of decarbonising, you're creating a better local environment, as well as a better local economy. Pádraig Fogarty, you've read his stuff on Whittled Away, he's brilliant on loss of biodiversity. He had no interest in climate. And he was kind of almost dismissive. He said, I'm fussing about climate when the real ecological crisis is happening before our face in terms of the loss of species.
Biodiversity loss.
And then he kind of copped on. We were looking at the various aspects. What does it really mean? What does decarbonisation mean? And actually copped on, do you know what? Actually, it has a potentially huge gain in terms of biodiversity, recovering it. So, so for, I think, particularly the west of Ireland, northwest of Ireland, the rural Ireland, this is the really transformation that's going to work, because it restores nature in a way that we have to do. It puts a value on that, so you start to, so that the carbon storage in Leitrim that's done in Leitrim forestry should stay in Leitrim. We should design it in a way where it's not an extractive investment or industry. It's putting money back into that community, and I think this is doable. I mean, everything I see in terms of what's happening internationally, what the European Union is going towards is recognising that CAP is going to change towards paying for biodiversity, water, carbon storage. If you look at what's happening in the world, like what's happening to the real economy, and I always say my carbon footprint is shot. I travel a lot, and I have to sometimes account for that. But one of the reasons I do is because I try and get a sense of what's happening elsewhere. In California, they're going at this 100%. They're not going back. The same in Japan, the same in China, the same in Germany. They are the three technological centres of the world. So, and they're going because it's a better economic model as well. It ain't going to change. This is coming. We have a choice as a country. We actually can be very good at it. We've got a relatively low carbon industrial base. Our industrial emissions from 1990 to 2016 went up something like 270%. Our emissions declined 30% from the industrial sector. So actually our economy, which is mainly in financial digital services, biopharma, medical devices and so on, is relatively low carbon for the wealth that is generated. In clean energy, we have a remarkable renewable resource, particularly in wind, and we've shown that we're actually one of the leading countries in introducing it. We've loads of companies. Like, look, what are the big Irish companies in this space? Things like Kingspan, one of the biggest insulation companies in the world. Things like companies like Glendimplex are one of the leading thinking companies in terms of heaters, how you do heat pumps and so on. And I always mention, because it's kind of particularly attractive, my mother came from Macroom, up from Macroom in Slieve Lucre, Ballydesmond, up the hills in Kerry. There's Munster Joinery, which makes some of the best insulated windows in the world, which they're now exporting to New York from. I'm not going to say the middle of nowhere, because for me it's the centre of the centre of everywhere.
Know it well, actually,
Slieve Lucre is doing it, so I think we will do it. I think we can be very good at it. I just wish we'd hurry up.
Yeah. And I suppose just finally on just a comment on our agricultural emissions seem to be a big concern for a lot of environmentalists. That's maybe somewhere where we're not.
I think we need to start thinking about just from agriculture to land use. I think we need a national land use plan going from the mountaintop right down to the sea. And doing it that way, you slightly change the perspective, because I think we need to start. We need to stop extracting peat straight away.
Yes.
That can give you a massive amount of carbon savings. 5, 6, 7, 8 million tonnes a year, which is a huge percent, a very large percentage of our existing emissions. to completely reimagine Irish forestry, going away from just a clear felling model towards continuous cover, natural rainforest.
So maybe more native species perhaps being fixed.
And much more, unfortunately, it's going to take time. So you're thinking 80-year forest or 100-year forest rather than a 40-year forest. And not just 100 years, that forest is going to be there forever and a day. I mean, the way I see it is it's Killarney National Park, right along the west-northwest coast particularly, which unfortunately in a climate change world is going to get wetter. And so that forest is going to be really useful in terms of managing water flow, in terms of storing carbon.
For flooding and things like
flooding,
that.
And protecting biodiversity. And also, like, if we're out there selling the Wind Atlantic Way and us as Origin Green, well, let's do it. Like, let's make it
special. Actually have a wild Atlantic
Way. A really wild Atlantic Way. And there's a lot of jobs in that. To do a continuous cover, I mean, we should be doing something like 20,000 hectares of planting a year, I think, versus the 5,000 we're doing at the moment. So it's a fourfold increase we need for the volume of carbon that, that would be very significant in terms of carbon reductions. And it would take about 30,000 people a year just to manage that. But they'd be 30,000 in the most isolated areas.
And sustainable jobs as well.
And absolutely
sustainable. Because this doesn't end.
No, and you end up, it takes 80 years, but really high value timber industry, like really, really high quality, rather than the pulp industry.
Yeah, which is the lower end of the timber industry.
And then you end up having wood that you store in buildings, so you change your
locking the carbon away in a sense.
It is not impossible, and it does. It's starting to happen in small pockets, but it is starting to happen. So we can test it and see that it is working.
So I suppose what you're referring to there really is.
And I'd say, that land use plan. That's nice. And then you come to farming, where you're really smart. Like, there was a guy called Hermann Scheer. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was a German SPD politician. He was the great visionary of renewables. He wrote a book called The Solar Century. I think it was back 30 years ago. I had the great fortune to meet him a few times. Passionate guy. The closing sentences or paragraphs of that book is to say, which is something I think is true, the farmers are the heroes in this. The farmers are the front line. The farmers are the people who are going to really be the key valued workers, because they're going to know every patch of land. What's that piece of land good for? That's good for food production. That's good for bioplastics. That's forestry. This is water management. It's scientific farming of the highest degree, and I think it's saying to Irish. I mean, the average age of the Irish farmer is now 57 and rising. No young people can get access to land unless you inherit it. And even if you do inherit it, increasingly you think, why would I go into farming? Because I'm isolated.
It's not very attractive.
Because I don't have status. Because so I think actually the exact opposite of what currently people see, Greens and environmentalists and farmers at each other. I think that's going to change, because actually I think the environmental future for farming is the best financial, status, social future for farming.
So I suppose in a sense it's seeing maybe the farmers as producers of ecosystem services and putting a monetary value on those.
And that's what European policy is going towards. So we're not fighting against the system in doing this. And the current system sucks unless you're a very wealthy dairy farmer.
Or a big beef processor or something.
Unless you're very good, but no one else is making money out of the beef industry.